Can you highlight some of the conversations that you had with any of the actors from a two point of views? A, just the excitement as a movie fan of being able to talk to these people, but out of these conversations, what did you learn something that was about yourself that you didn't know before existed?
Well, the De Niro one is fascinating. To me, it's one of the centerpieces of the book. And again, the book is available wherever books are sold. So go to your Barnes and Noble, Mango Publishing, whatever you like. What I found interesting with De Niro was, I was at the Little League World Series doing my actual job at Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So it's about a 5 hour drive from Connecticut. And again, one of the talent bookers, Katie, got a hold of me and said, De Niro's coming. He's promoting a boxing movie called Hands of Stone. And I know De Niro's not much of a sports fan. So I said, okay, he's only doing this because it's a boxing movie, ESPN, et cetera. So I said, I'll be there. So I worked until 7 or 8 that night. And then my wife and I, we had two boys at the time. We have four now. We drove back. I remember my boss saw me in the hotel and he starts laughing. What are you doing? Like he just sees me in my entourage. And I said, what? We're going to go interview De Niro. He just starts laughing. He's like, have fun. So we drove back 5 hours in the middle of the night. And my main thing I kept saying to myself was, his name is Robert De Niro, but nobody ever calls him Robert. Everyone always calls him Bob.
Wow.
Mr. De Niro sounds a little too formal, but I don't want to just call him Bob out of the gate. So my friend Tim Kirchner, who's a fellow broadcaster, does a great job on ESPN on baseball, said, you can just ask him. I said, that's a good idea. So I got back, and then the next morning, my wife and I get up, and she loves De Niro like I do. So we dropped the kids off at the neighbors and went into ESPN. And, obviously there's lots of butterflies, lots of emotion. It's like talking to somebody who you deeply respect and admire. And, I have some ideas in my head. I always jot down a few things. And, I had a 5 hour drive, so I got to think of different things I wanted to ask him. But again, it's 15 minutes, which, as they definitely fly by. But when he turned the corner, I said, oh my God, it's like a surprise party. He almost was, oh my God, get down. Here he is. And he came in, and honestly, Jawad, he was so sweet. He just had a big smile on his face. As I described in the book, he was very avuncular. He's just like a very sweet guy, resembling an uncle, long flowing hair. And I think, De Niro is famously taciturn. When I said to him there was no camera, I think he loosened up a little bit. Like I think he was appreciative of that. Like a podcast is just me and him. We didn't have
Yeah.
any. And basically, what I found is I wanted to ask him questions he wasn't going to be asked. Somebody that day asked him, what's your favorite movie of yours? And I said, that's the worst question you can ask an actor or a director or a screenwriter. Because I said, every project is so personal to them. Like you
Hmm.
face it a different way and say, which project are you fond of? Or which one did you have a real personal attack? Like, that's okay. When you say a favorite movie, like, I don't know, like they come for different reasons. By the way, he did answer the question. He said, I like Raging Bull and I like Midnight Run, which is pretty funny. I know Raging Bull is one of his favorites, but I'm glad he included Midnight Run, which is obviously a great comedy. So I said, okay, I'm not going to ask him that stuff. I don't want to ask him the generic stuff. I have to ask him about the movie which he's promoting, which I watched, which was okay. It was. So I said, what do I do? So the approach I took was I asked him first about Tribeca because I had a Tribeca shirt. So, okay, he knows I'm a big fan, whatever. I asked him about, for a guy who's such a private guy, this is a very public festival. How did it first begin? You and Jane Rosenthal. He basically gave Jane most of the credit. The next question I asked him was when I said, no one else is going to ask him this question today. I asked him about the documentary he did about his dad. And I said, again, for a guy who's so private and so famously remote, you really dedicate a lot of time to telling the story about your dad. It's fascinating documentary on HBO, and your dad was a famous painter. That got Bob talking a little bit about that. And I said, okay, at the very least, he'll appreciate that I'm asking him questions that no one else is asking him, and hope it's personal to him. From there, I started talking about my favorite movies of his, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas. And again, time runs short. You tell a few jokes, et cetera, but we get through it. At the end of the interview, he turns to me and says, Pakistan. I said, yeah, because when I asked him about Taxi Driver, I said, it's one of my favorite movies. And yet, I'm the son of Pakistani immigrants. I was born in Toronto. I was born in 78. The movie came out in 76. I've got no personal attachment to Travis Bickle, who's some guy from Oklahoma and New York that I was related to the character because it's about loneliness and urban alienation. And so Bob's remembered this at the end of the interview. He goes, Pakistan. I said, yeah. He goes, there's a great article about the Hindu Kush. It's like the lost tribes of Pakistan. And he goes, it's really interesting. I read it recently. And he goes, if you have trouble finding it, let me know. And I'm laughing, thinking, I'm just going to email him. Like, oh, yeah, let me know. Where's that article, Bob? So anyways, I thank him and his friend Stan. By the way, most of these people, as you know, have entourages. Bob came with one person, his friend Stan, who was a very nice guy, who thanked me after and said that was a great interview. You did an awesome job. I said, thanks so much. My wife and I later, by the way, on campus saw Bob walking with Stan. Kind of give us a friendly wave. Like, you're still in awe. You can't believe it's Robert De Niro. And I was able to kind of manage the adrenaline during the interview because I had so much I wanted to ask him. It really only hit me once the interview was over. Then you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting with Robert De Niro. I thankfully got a couple of pictures. I made him laugh. I have a picture of him laughing. What I said was, I love Don Rickles' line. He said, I had dinner with De Niro once. It was like having dinner alone. So that got a chuckle out of Bob because again, he was so famously quiet. And that was it. So I dropped my wife back home. I've got to get back to Williamsport, Pennsylvania for my actual job working for ESPN. It's a 5-hour drive. As I'm driving, there's an email that came and said from RDN's office. And I said, there's only one RDN. So I pulled over and it just said, hi, this is the article that Bob mentioned that he wanted you to read. Really enjoyed spending time with you. And I said, that is unbelievable. I've interviewed hundreds of athletes and actors and entertainers. Normally, they're all very polite. Once the interview ends, they shake your hand, they thank you, and that's it. And it's exceptionally rare that any of them ask them anything about you. You mentioned hockey and the hockey of a certain era. Paul Coffey interviewed, who's the assistant coach of the Oilers. I interviewed him back in November, and I was surprised. Either beginning or at the end of the interview, he asked something about me. That never happens. Normally, you ask the questions, they thank you, you leave. So he said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Kingston." He's, "Oh, yeah, Kingston. Yeah, okay, great. Frontenac fan, OHL." Like it was just, it's unusual to me because normally they don't do it, and I get it. They've got things to do. There's other jobs. The fact that De Niro actually took an interest in me, that on that chopper back to Tribeca, at some point he told his assistant, "Hey, make sure you get that guy's email and make sure you find that article. He would enjoy that." I was floored by it, and it's something I will always appreciate. It tells you a few things about him. One, his attention to detail. One, he's conscientious. And three, he's very well read. This was an article he just happened to come across in the New York Times. Robert De Niro is an Italian-American, Irish bloodlines. What does he care about Pakistan? But he read this article. He remembered it. Very, very cool. The article, by the way, if you want to look it up, it's called The Lost Tribes of the Hindu Kush. Very, very cool.